All right. So you heard the crazy creative stuff. What I want to do now is talk to Brent about how we can think about the business side of this. And the reason I asked Brent to do this with me tonight is not just because we've had a fantastic working relationship for the past several years, but also because he has a fundamental intuition about good story and about how good story can be extended, on top of which he sometimes anchors my balloon with reality. You need that. So Brent Weinstein, people, come on and have a seat. What I'd like to do is have you give us an overview of what you do at United Talent Agency and what your picture of this space has been like, how it's developed in recent years and especially recent months.
I'm an agent at United Talent Agency. I run our digital media department. UTA is United Talent Agency. So we're one of the largest full-service talent and literary agencies in the world. We represent everyone from major film and television stars like Johnny Depp to the creators of some of the most successful television and film franchises, people like Judd Apatow, David Chase, Alan Ball. I run our digital media department. It's everything from the work that our clients do in the online space. Oh, I guess we're being asked to squeeze together. We're sitting outside the margins of the video. Got it. So it's work that our clients do in online entertainment, in video games. We do a fair amount of corporate consulting as well for companies as large as Electronic Arts and as small as venture-backed startups. And we work with a number of companies like Starlight Runner, none that do what Starlight Runner does, but when I say similar to, I mean companies that are thinking about different ways to reinvent how media is developed, produced, distributed, monetized, etc. So that's what I do.
Talk to us about the multi-platform narrative space and how it's evolved in the past few years.
I'll do my best.
Okay.
The one thing about this space is that it's hardly a science. It's nowhere near a science. Everyone is still trying to figure it out, myself included, Jeff included. So I always like to qualify that whenever I get up and talk like this, because holding myself out as an expert, anyone holding themselves out as an expert, is probably hiding something. Whatever we know today might absolutely change tomorrow. So, I've seen it evolve. I think that the media business generally has changed pretty considerably over the last, certainly several years. The financing models have changed. The distribution models have changed. Things that people felt fairly secure about just a few years ago, now they're scared to death about. Models that people felt fairly comfortable with are starting to change and disappear. And what's been born out of that, amongst other things, is this notion of transmedia. I think it's always existed, to Jeff's point, but I think that people are gravitating towards it in an entirely new way. And in many cases, there's a lot of brilliant work that's coming out of that. And in some cases, transmedia is a buzzword that people use to fill a gap in their professional lives because they don't know where else to turn. And I think that, we'll figure out how that all shakes itself out.
When people ask me about what it takes to become involved with transmedia production, the fastest answer is you have to be a really nerdy dude. What to you are kind of the criteria, the skill set that would be conducive to becoming involved with developing content across different platforms and making money at it?
Whew, that's a tough one. Can people hear? I'm trying to not eat the microphone, but that's tough. I think that, again, based on what we know today, I think you have to be good at something, right? So, again, back to sort of my notion that a lot of people misinterpret what transmedia is, and I think, one of many things that can be taken from Jeff's presentation is that what it's not is writing a movie and then understanding how that movie is retold as a video game and how the comic book plays out. It's not multi-platform marketing. It's can just be a screenplay. A screenplay can be a transmedia asset all by itself without a single document talking about what the comic book is, so long as the screenplay is written in such a way that it can be naturally exploited in those other platforms without just retelling the same story.
Exactly.
And I think that that's the first thing that would make a successful transmedia producer, someone who understands what transmedia is. What I see a lot are people who say transmedia, but what they mean is, I have an idea for a movie and I've also figured out what the comic book and the video game are, but they're not really thinking about it in the way that I would consider to be true transmedia. By the way, I may be wrong, but the way that I think about transmedia, I don't think people are thinking about it the right way. So I think first people have to understand, or at least get on the same page as to what it is, and then sort of my first comment, they have to sort of be good at something, right? So it's fantastic to have a transmedia franchise. It has to start somewhere, right? It has to start somewhere. It might start as a screenplay, it might start as a comic book, it might start as a video game, it might start as a movie, but you have to be proficient at not only thinking of it as a transmedia property, but you have to really be able to excel and go a little bit deeper in at least one of those areas. So if you're a transmedia producer who happens to be a screenwriter, fantastic. If you're a transmedia producer who has interactive entertainment experience, great. If you're a transmedia producer who can publish a comic book, fantastic. I think that, unfortunately, the film business, the television business, the video game business, you know, maybe the toy business, and even that is very limited. There's very few businesses where the idea person is the one that reaps the rewards. It's got to be idea plus some sort of execution. And I think that, you know, George Lucas may have had a great idea for this thing called Star Wars, but if he turned it over to his buddy Larry to go, you know, make it, we'd be talking about how Larry's a genius. So I think, you know, it's got to be a combination of understanding transmedia and some executional abilities.
Absolutely. I certainly agree. What's your sense of how this will persist? There are naysayers who feel that this is some kind of odd sort of trend, and that we're all going to go back to our corners and silos and stay there for the rest of the century. What's your thought in terms of how the direction that the entertainment business is going in general, with regard to this kind of multi-platform storytelling?
Well, I think it's become so expensive to launch franchises that I think media companies have to think about how those franchises will live in multiple verticals. The question is, when are they going to think about it? And that is one thing that makes transmedia complicated today, is that everyone wants to talk about transmedia. Everyone wants a franchise that has transmedia attributes, but that development executive at Pick Your Studio, when they're hearing the pitch for the movie or reading the screenplay, his or her job really relies on whether or not the movie is good. And so if they believe in the movie part of it, the fact that there's transmedia elements maybe is the reason that you push it over the edge. Maybe it's the thing that gets them to pick up the project or greenlight it.
Cool.
But they have to really believe in the movie. So I think what it comes down to is all of the talk about transmedia is great. At the end of it, at the heart, there has to be a really special franchise, because not that much stuff gets made, right? Certainly relative to the stuff that's out there. So, you know, I think moving forward, all of these big franchises, they're going to have transmedia components, whether they're brought into studios already having been developed as transmedia, whether they're developed by the studios along the way. I think we'll have to see how that plays itself out.
Right now, not specifically, but what aspect of the studios are actually paying for transmedia?
Loaded question. A lot of them do. I mean, let me put it to you a different way. I think all of them are. I just don't know if they all call it transmedia, and I don't know if they're necessarily paying it to third parties. But I think every studio is thinking about how they can utilize online entertainment and publishing and video games. They may not think of it as transmedia, but they're thinking about it. There's a limited number of studios, and you know them because we're trying to put you into business with as many of them as possible, that are willing to look outside and really invest in transmedia. And that list seems to be growing, which is good. The list of people who respond to those opportunities is also growing. I'm not sure that...
What are the factors of of actually responding? What is making them kind of change their mind, do you think? Is it really just because it's trendy, or is is someone talking sense into them?
I think in some cases it's a pure case of need and a lack of resources. You know, I had a conversation with a studio executive at one of the big ones just a week or so ago, and he was letting me know that they had this big franchise. It came out. It was a movie that's already been out, very successful. Without revealing any details, let's just say that the movie, you know, features a bunch of, I don't know, name a random species, right? It's not Navi. You know, a whole collection of these species, and he's saying to himself, you know, we missed the boat because we could have taken a beat and we could have worked with someone like Starlight Runner or a transmedia producer to help us flush out every element of each one of these different types of this species. And there could have been character, and there could have been interesting properties and an interesting backstory. And here we are, you know, we're in production on the sequel, but it'll be a 3-year gap between the first and the second one. We could have been telling a lot of stories in between. And because we didn't think about it early enough, we missed the boat. So now we want to think about it. So if the second movie is as or more successful as the first, and we're thinking about the third movie, which will be several years off, now we have an opportunity to maintain that connection with the audience, make money, sell whatever they're going to sell based on the transmedia elements.
The contracts that we've been dealing with, and the contracts that are yet to come, that are a little bit more empowering, or will enable a transmedia storyteller a little bit more control, a little bit more of the ability to actually leverage these platforms in order to realize an artistic vision. How's that going to get done? You know, it seems tough just to get a regular contract through these.
Yeah, I mean,
these studios.
at the end of the day, whoever's paying for it is ultimately going to make the decisions. So going into Warner Brothers or Disney or Fox or Sony and saying, hey, we have an idea for a film franchise, whereas yesterday you would have just pitched the movie or shown them the screenplay and you would have gotten your work for hire deal, they would own it. Showing them the transmedia franchise probably isn't going to change that deal, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones investing $200 million in making and marketing the film. So they're going to take the risk, they're going to take the reward. Now, having thought about the transmedia components, are you ensuring that your vision as a creator has a greater chance of seeping its way into, you know, different exploitations of the franchise? Yes. If you have a specific background in different areas, if you're an interactive game designer, having thought about the game, do you have an opportunity to, in that initial contract, reserve your right to perform services in that game? Maybe. If there's a comic book and you have that background, you know. So there's ways we can think about it, but ultimately, is it going to shift the notion of control or ownership in favor of the transmedia producer? I don't think so, unless the transmedia producer is coming to the table with equity, with cash.
Well, I take those little maybes as cracks in the door.
Right. But I think, listen, what a transmedia producer, here's where it starts to get interesting, right? So films are getting financed in lots of different ways now, and third-party financiers, foreign funds, et cetera, they don't have development slates. Warner Brothers can buy 100 scripts for every movie they want to produce. You know, the big international financial institutions can't. They want to back franchises that are greenlit, essentially. So is there a way for transmedia to come in a little sideways through some of these foreign institutions and give them a movie that they would finance, but also, because these institutions don't have large consumer product groups and marketing divisions and licensing, you know, arms, laying it out for them, can we do that? Maybe. So maybe that's the way in. Maybe the way in is to, you know, having produced some of it before, make the transmedia producer a real equity participant in the profits of the film.
I like that part.
Now, you know, you don't wake up tomorrow and be a first dollar gross producer. It's about, you know, there's producers in Hollywood that have produced lots and lots of films, some of which are very successful, and they're just now earning or just now losing, you know, their hard-earned back end. You know, so you're not going to get it first time out, but it's a process like anything else.
Right. Another conduit that we've seen is international with regard to development. The Canadian government is strongly encouraging, if not enforcing, the development of content multi-platform in order to be funded. So you have to have an interactive component to your television show or movie if you want Canadian dollars into your production. And those guys don't have much experience at this because they're not allowing simply a website to just list the stars of the show or things like that. And they're tapping American talent to help them with that. There's enormous activity in the United Kingdom, in Asia, with regard to multi-platform. Australia's developing a kind of super fund for multi-platform. Is that your sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, whatever's happening today, who knows what it'll look like tomorrow, but I think that international, these big North American-based media companies, they have lots of people to throw at this stuff. So the companies that don't are going to have to figure it out some other way. Right. And I think that, working with independent transmedia producers, people that bring a real solid skill set and experience to the table, absolutely is one way to go. Yeah.
Okay. Before we open it up for questions, one more thing. There's a lot of incredible talent, traditional and new media in this room. If they're looking for representation, why? First of all, why would they need a UTA, and why wouldn't they need a UTA? And what are the criteria for you to actually pick up talent, because you're going to get inundated at this?
Again, very good question. For me personally, whenever I'm looking at taking on a client, and I think most agents would say this way, is that I want to be in business with people who I think are really talented, people who I'm passionate about, people whose work I would buy or watch just as a consumer, and people who I think are the uber elite of their category. For every, God knows how many screenplays our agency reviews every year, most of whom come to us from managers and lawyers and, sources that are trusted. We take on very few. For all the actors we see in all the major Hollywood movies, all the festivals we go to, all the comedy clubs that we, camp out at on a nightly basis, we take on very few clients. And I think that that's relative to the number of acting jobs that are out there. So when we start talking about transmedia, how many transmedia jobs are there today? And how many people can naturally fill those jobs? And thus, how many can I represent, right?
Right.
I want to make sure that I'm doing a good job for the clients that I have. So anytime I think about taking on another client in any category, it's, the first question is always, can I represent this new client without doing a disservice to my existing clients? And if the answer to that question is yes, then the next question is, okay, are there opportunities? Can I be helpful? And there's been lots of people who I thought were really talented, but if I didn't think I could be helpful, I've just been honest, right?
That's cool.
And in terms of why someone would benefit from representation, putting UTA as a specific agency aside, although, I happen to think that we're great, these opportunities are derivative of one of two things. Work-for-hire opportunities, when Sony, Fox, whoever it is, has a transmedia assignment or something that, if we push hard enough, could turn into a transmedia assignment. Agencies, managers, we're the ones that likely would know about it and have the opportunity to push our clients for it. And then if we're talking about something that's purely spec, a screenplay, a pitch, it's hard to go and get in, that VP of Warner Brothers' office to pitch a thing, right? And again, agencies, managers were the ones that traditionally, the studios and networks, it's a very symbiotic relationship. A lot of times, it's friction, but one thing that they rely on us for is to help filter for them so that when someone from UTA or CAA or WME or the other agencies calls and says, hey, we have this amazing project, VP at Fox, we really want you to sit down and hear it, they know that we're not calling 50 times a day.
Right.
And so they're likely to take the meeting, and then it's our job to make sure that that's interesting to them, because if you send someone in that room too many times and you get passes now when you make the call, maybe there's a hesitation. So, as a professional representative, I believe in what we deliver. In terms of, you know, my personal taste and what I'm looking for, it's just very much case by case. Yeah, and I imagine we'll take on more transmedia clients as there's more transmedia work.
Okay.
Like you said, everyone's got to eat.